don't have enough red blood cells, you can't carry enough oxygen, right? Right. Red blood cells carry oxygen. Good. So basically, you're sending this fluid out that doesn't have as much oxygen as it would if you had all your red blood cells, the normal amount. So it's an issue when you bleed because you have less reserve. So if a normal person had 10 red blood cells per drop, if you only have 5, you can only carry half as much oxygen. Good. All right. So more stuff from resistance because our arteries are awesome. I play with resistance every day in people's circulation. So pardon the acronyms, hypertension, HTN, high blood pressure. So shock and hypothermia. These are all situations where resistance in the body is not good. If you think about it, if you have a normal heart pumping blood out and you clamp down all your vessels, the resistance is going to go up, right? So your blood pressure is going to rise. It's going to be higher, actually, because there's high resistance in a small little tube you're flowing through. So the blood's going to fly through there with a lot of pressure, right?
Yes.
Okay. So why don't we have high blood pressure, you and I, or at least hopefully none of you do?
Because our blood isn't shooting because it's not blocked up.
Well, it's kind of a trick question. Sorry. It's because we're not old. No one's here old. We can make fun of old people. No one here is old.
Chris.
So when you get old, your vessels, or arteries, which are normally pretty floppy, they start becoming stiff, and they become harder and harder tubes. So your resistance goes up, and your hearts just have to really churning really hard to get blood to get perfused up to all your extremities. So your blood pressure goes up.
That's why you take 27 pills.
That's why they take like 37 pills. And so we play with this all day long. We have people with high blood pressure, low blood pressure, and we're constantly playing with this resistance outside of them. All right? So this is actually a lot of what physicians do. Blood pressure, everyone has blood pressure problems. Yeah?
So what do the pills do to increase the pressure? Like, how do they?
They relax the arteries, is the main thing.
So I thought that when, like, I think this is right. When you have a cold or something and you got a fever, your blood, your temperature is high. But what is it in relation to your blood pressure? Is it lower?
Yeah. For all intents and purposes, it won't change much. Your pulse goes up when you get a fever, but that's kind of it's just because you're hot. Just like when you're outside, if you're really hot, and it's like a terrible. Actually, Cleveland doesn't have that hot days.
Really?
I grew up in South Carolina. It was terrible. Please. You'll notice that your heart rate's a little faster because you're trying to pump blood out to your extremities where it's colder. So the important thing to realize with the body is that resistances are, I know you guys love these formulas, parallel and series.
Yeah.
Resistances, yeah. So you come off of this one huge tube, the aorta, right? And you're constantly branching off. Each one of those branches is basically a parallel circuit, right? So you come off and you have like 4 branches off the aorta, 4 parallel circuits. So it decreases your resistance a lot. So that's the only reason basically you can perfuse these places that are far out. If you had everything in series, just like one big tube that kind of snake through the body like that, the resistance would be so high, you'd never get blood to the end of it. I don't even know how it'd be possible. So you guys are painfully familiar with this. Have you guys gone through how blood flows through?
Yes.
2 circulations? Good.
Okay.
I like it. You do it. So pulmonary and systemic, you guys already did this stuff. We went over pressures. Since I'm over the age of 18, I apparently can't use a computer or make a video work. I have a video here. But since I'm old, I can't use computers.
Is it on YouTube?
Probably. I'll get to it. It's just picture the heartbeat. You guys seen picture the heartbeat?
In real life?
I have one in real life. Not with me. But there's one on YouTube.
No.
All right, we'll come back to it. No, not a fake. We'll come back to it. A real one. We'll come back to it. All right.
We'll see.
So, big formula of the day, besides Ohm's law, you guys already know. This guy right here, cardiac output. Cardiac output is the force of life. It is awesome. So, cardiac output is equal to heart rate times stroke volume. You guys got over stroke volume?
No.
Yes or no?
No.
Okay, good. The stroke volume.
No.
Your heart fills up with blood while it's resting, right? You guys go over systole and diastole?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so in diastole, you're resting, filling the heart up, right? So you have a certain amount of blood in there, and you're gonna squeeze, right? Just like it's basically like two hands come together. Squeeze, blood goes out, right? The amount of blood that's ejected out, stroke volume. Make sense?
Volume. It makes sense now.
Yeah. So your heart rate is just your pulse. So for the average person, you and I sitting here, your pulse is about 70. Your stroke volume is actually only about 70 milliliters, which seems really small. I've always thought 70 milliliters is like. But your average cardiac output, though, is the impressive part. 5 liters a minute. You all probably have about 5 liters of blood in you, except for maybe you. You probably only have like 4. You circulate this 5 liters through your body every minute. So every blood cell in your body, on average, goes out of your heart to like the farthest, down to your baby toe or whatever. And within a minute, it's gone all the way back to the heart and gets pushed back out again. It's a pretty remarkable system. Now, if you go to the doctor, we feel pulses all the time. Pulses are great because no matter what people say, just looking at you, I have no idea what your heart looks like. It's big, it's small. Some people have big hearts, some people have huge hearts. But you can feel someone's artery, which are the pulsations coming through the aorta, off to this branch, and down to one of your extremities. So like, we'll feel the radial right here off your thumb. There's this guy right here, shoot.
How come some athletes can control their heart rate?
I wouldn't say control. By you mean control, like they have normal, low resting heart rate?
Because I knew this guy who had a constant resting heart rate, even when he was playing tennis at 45.
He's awesome.
He might have been a liar. We'll get to that. The next slide is actually on resting heart rate. But it's pretty tough to exert yourself and stay below 60 or 70. Yeah. if so, he is amazing. So the problem is, if we look at this equation with stroke volume and pulse rate to make up our cardiac output, we can change. It's basically a variant of Ohm's law. We're multiplying two things times each other, and they equal whatever we want. You can't change your stroke volume that much. Your heart's a given size. It will fill to a certain size, and it will push out a certain amount. You can change it a little, but really, at the end of the day, all you can really do is increase how fast that pump goes. Boom, 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 boom. So what you can do to get more cardiac output is
Exercise.
increase your heart rate, right?
By exercise.
Yeah, so you're upstairs, heart rate goes up. You don't feel your heart like swelling in your chest to try to push out more blood. So the way that we regulate our cardiac output is really by heart rate. And someone already beat me to it. There we go. So since I'm old, you've never heard of my heroes. It's sad.
We have
You'll-
heard of Lance
Who?
Armstrong.
Oh, no, this is Miguel Indurain. Although Lance Armstrong, he was like Lance Armstrong before Lance Armstrong existed. So his cardiac output was 50 liters a minute. Now he probably only had about 5 liters of blood in his body. So he recirculated his entire blood volume 10 times a minute when he was really going after it, which is pretty freaking amazing. 50 liters a minute? I mean, that's ridiculous. His resting pulse was 28 beats a minute, which is cool to read, but if you think about it, if you put your arm, your fingers on his pulse, it went like this. Loved up. Loved up. Loved up.
Isn't that good though?
Yeah, so it's amazing. He had this huge, gigantic heart. It was like half his chest. And each time it would fill up with a ton of blood and inject a ton of blood. So with this really, really, really high stroke volume, when he was sitting around not doing much, and his cardiac output didn't have to be that high, his heart rate could be really low, and he'd be fine. He'd just be sitting here, no big deal. And so it gave him a bunch of reserve. Although this is proof, as I say, that genetics can't overcome a really ugly helmet.
I like
That is
it.
awful.
I like it.
It's pretty awesome. No, I like it too.
So our cardiac output is pretty important. Yeah.
Did all the exercise make his heart bigger, or he just had a huge heart?
In his case, he had really good genes, but also a lot of training. So as you train, your heart actually becomes more and more muscular, and you can improve your cardiac output a lot. Someone who's untrained, your cardiac output max is probably more like 10 or 15 liters a minute. 25 is a pretty good athlete, and then the spectrum of good athletes like Olympics goes from about 30 up to 50.
Yeah. So is it safe to say that in the cardiac output equation that the stroke volume is basically constant, the only thing that's interchangeable with heart rate?
Functionally, yes. I think I tell you, yeah, I lied a little bit. You can change your stroke volume a little, but it's I admit it, I lied a little bit. But really the way, if you want to double your cardiac output, if you want to double your cardiac output, the way you do it is by popping up your heart rate. Because that's really easy and quick to do. And the reason I didn't go into the stroke volume changes is because it's really complicated. We can go over it if we have time, but it involves hormones and we'll get to it. So, cardiac output's important for everything that was invented before like 1985.
How do you measure somebody's cardiac output?
Complicated. Trying to think the best. There's no easy way. You can float a catheter, so you can put a balloon into the aorta. So if you put something in the aorta and snake it back, it'll go back into the.
Oh,
yeah. Who said that?
Oh, he asked me a question.
Good. Left ventricle, right? So if you put it back in there, you can measure the blood flow coming past this catheter you put in.
When is that mandatory for these five?
Sorry?
When is that mandatory for these five?
When do we look at someone's cardiac output? When someone's in heart failure. And heart failure is really just a bad pump. So if we don't know how much the pump is putting out, we can put this line down to see how much they're actually putting out. So remember when I said we float pulses because we can't tell what your heart really is doing? This is one of the ways we see actually what your heart is really doing. But it involves putting a big catheter in your aorta, so it's not something we do for fun. Everyone on board? Yeah. All right. So yeah, anything before 1985, basically running, playing, having fun, everything except video games. You have to increase your cardiac output. Now, someone asked earlier about when you work out, why you're not cold on the outside. And one of the things that happens is whatever part of your body is active, that's who's going to get the blood flow. So you're running a 100-yard dash, your guts don't need blood flow at the time. You're not eating, and if so, that's really impressive, and you shouldn't be eating while running 100 But your legs are going to be working overtime, right?
Yeah.
And so what happens when you run, or like when you start lifting weights or something like that, what do your legs feel like?
Noodles.
They start
Yeah.
burning,
They
feel
feel weak.
they feel weak. So the burning is actually acid being built up from these byproducts. So I said we make waste, we take an oxygen to put out waste, that's not enough oxygen getting there, and they're starting to make acid basically as a temporary measure to try to keep going. And so that's why you have to send all your blood flow to those big legs and give them all your blood flow. The gut doesn't need stuff. The brain we always perfuse, right? I'm very brain centric. And so that's why you use your arteries to shunt blood to the right spot. So there are arteries going to your gut, to your small intestine, things like that. All those arteries clamp right off, and all the blood starts going to your big legs. Good? Okay. Anyone have any questions? I was going to go over go.
So when it feel like your foot or your fingers is going to sleep, is that because enough blood ain't going to them?
Yeah. But don't worry, you're not going to die.
It feel like you ain't walking on them.
It's like, oh. So when the blood flow, first of all, when does that happen?
Huh?
When does that happen?
Usually when you're on the toilet.
Yeah. When do you feel like you're like
What? Yeah, my
Like
football.
say if I'm just sitting here, I just keep my legs like
Look
this.
at your legs right now.
I know that's what I'm talking about.
So
but
they're
I just
crossed.
remember just because my foot just was
So your legs
straight,
are
so
crossed,
I-
right?
Yeah.
So when you cross your legs, you can close up an artery, exactly. Not enough blood flow.
You have to walk, start hurting.
You know how, let's say when you sleep, when you sleep, you have less blood flow. So how would you,
Yeah, a little bit.
so like, how do you grow when you sleep? Or is that
How do you grow in your sleep?
You're just born that big, huh?
So first of all, everything in your body, any place once it becomes active, it gets blood flow. And the way it does that is kind of complicated, but the easy way to just think about it is that a place that becomes active gets blood flow. And so if your legs start growing a little bit at night, like the muscles in your legs, they'll send out a little hormone basically. It says like, hey, I think we're gonna grow a little bit tonight. Like, let's get some blood, and the blood will be shunted down into that spot.